corporate and academic world. He's currently a visiting faculty at multiple IIMs, including IIM Ahmedabad. As an independent consultant, he has advised several senior leaders and mid-management professionals in reputed organizations like Aditya Birla, Robert Bosch, TE Connectivity, and several small and medium enterprises in information technology and manufacturing sectors. Rajesh is an external facilitator at Tata Management Training Center, Pune, and has conducted multiple leadership development programs for several Tata Group companies. Rajesh is a GTM coach at Plugin, an accelerator formed between Intel, Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, IIT Bombay, and Department of Science and Technology. In his spare time, he advises several startups in honing their go-to-market approach and business pitch. So, Rajesh, sir, over to you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And first of all, I would like to place on record my gratitude to Center for Business Markets at ISB for giving me this opportunity. Good evening to everyone on the webinar. And also, I didn't know that this is the first webinar from CBM. It puts a lot of responsibility. I hope there is some learning from the next 60 minutes or thereabout we'll be spending together. Let me explain the genesis behind putting this together. The genesis behind putting together this is about 17 years. I was also in the corporate world in different capacity. Right from being a soldier to the head of the unit, and then running P&L and so on and so forth. And the last 8 years, I have worked with many of you. I'm sure some of our paths might have crossed as well. I do consult to several organizations in the area of revenue growth, which is value selling, key account management, execution excellence, intrapreneurship, and so on and so forth. So as this event was unfolding, obviously, some of us are in the role of being academics also, in the sense I teach at 3 IIMs. In fact, Ahmedabad is one among them. IIM Udaipur and IIM Shillong are the other two institutes that are dear to my heart. So I just reflected back, saying, what is the kind of management style we are all used to? And as I started reflecting on that, it became extremely clear to me in my mind that in the next 6 months, those very principles and the practices that are followed will definitely come up short. And that thought made me, collate all of this, and therefore it's more practitioner oriented. It's not going to be, 20,000 feet level, just the strategy or some few boxes and things like that. It'll be much more tangible on the ground, what actions one need to take. There are two parts. One is as an individual, what I can do to help an organization come back to life or come back to normalcy. And the second is as a manager or a leader, how much transparent should I be with my people? How do I communicate? What should I do as a leader? So a few things on both ends of the spectrum is what I've tried to put together. And I have called this as breathing life back into business. The reason is simple. All of us know that at this moment, but for a few industries like perhaps an IT industry, information technology industry, which is built on the platform of digital distance management, virtual environment, are continuing to do the function, and rest of the industries are almost shut down, right? At this moment, we are in a lock-in stage across the world in different countries. Supply chain is completely disrupted. It's completely disconnected. To bring it back also is a question mark. It will not be the same as what it was when we went into the lockdown period, and that's known to all of you. I'm just setting the context of where this is coming in from. And therefore, some of the things that we need to really question is what I'm trying to do. And therefore, you'll find some of the concepts a little bit more provocative in nature, but do, reflect on this and critique, comment. The idea is not that it is my point of view, as always, some of you would have known. It is a collective point of view. I have put out some point of view, and which will potentially help everyone. The second very important reason for this is, I strongly believe that if you look around the world, societies where there is peace and harmony are the ones where the businesses are. And for success of enterprises is extremely important. I have always believed that. And at this particular juncture, clearly, I mean, when we know when we come back to a normalcy, it will not quite be the same. That can cause enormous social unrest. Therefore, my intent is through this presentation, whatever little that I'm possibly making you think, would help you in really bringing the organizations back far more quickly, because that is extremely essential for the way the world will turn out to be in the near future. And that's the reason, I'm particularly passionate about this webinar. And thanks for allocating your 60 minutes for this. I'll move ahead. Just one of the things that I want to really, it's like a safe harbor clause almost. In the last 30, 40 years of our lives, or maybe 50 years also, if you take, there have been several disruptions to business and normal social life through either anthropogenic, in the sense man-made disasters, or natural calamities. Right? There have been several, hundreds of them possible. There have been some enormous disruptions of 2008 financial crisis, 1990s currency crisis in the southeast, and so on and so forth. There are dot-com bust, several others. However, from a calamity perspective, in terms of the human suffering, one disaster that comes close to this is perhaps the tsunami of 2000. So I tried to see, could we learn something from some of those, right? Tsunami of 2004, if you look at, many of it's not fresh in our memory, because memory is always very short these days. I had to look for the numbers, and it was pretty staggering, actually. The casualties were close to 300,000 people. You can see those numbers. Real death, the people who lost their lives is 175,000 reported, 100,000 odd are still missing. But mind you, the impact of this lasted only a few weeks, and we knew the event was definitely over. Also, the second thing is it impacted only 17 nations. The biggest brunt was borne by, had about 70% of the casualties. Sri Lanka was the second, something like 35, 36,000 people lost their lives and went missing. India was the third with about 16,000. And now you compare this against what is just panning out today. We have just crossed about, I was looking at that Worldometer, which gives you the number of statistics in terms of the impact. It's about 185,000 people we have lost already across the globe. And pretty much every nation across the world is impacted, except for, I looked up on Google for the sake of the webinar as well. At this moment, there are 5 countries who have not reported a case. One of them happens to be North Korea, and we can pretty much ignore that because of the transparency we have to that country. 2 countries in Africa, I think I had not heard about them. I'm not that I'm a whiz kid of geography, but I haven't heard about them. So they are possibly the countries where there is hardly any trade or anybody goes or anything gets reported. And there are 2 islands in Pacific Ocean which have not been impacted, or at least they have not reported. So you can imagine the magnitude of it. And at this moment, we don't know when this is going to end. And we also can anticipate that this is not going to end in the near future in terms of a conclusive. And therefore, to say that, I can draw parallel from other disasters, other events, is really something that I won't agree with. I mean, we can draw certain elements from there, learn. Where I'm heading is, the companies say we have business continuity plans, we have disaster recovery plans. They'll all come up short because nobody had planned for a entire world's lockdown for 1 month, right? Or perhaps more. And when they open up also, there'll be a lot of fear. We'll be running at best 50, 60% of the capacity of plants, right? Aside the IT industry, as I told you, which is one industry which is blessed with virtual world, being on the built on the virtual world. But if you take a automobile plant or a component manufacturer for any of the other industries, they will have to open their plans in a very different way, right? Hence, the answers are very few. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but that's why I'm saying that drawing a parallel from the past and saying this, I think, should work without questioning radically is going to be a very suboptimal effort, or so it will yield suboptimal outcome for you. I am trying to put this saying, I haven't seen anything which comes close to this. The other event that was something close to being contagious is SARS. And if you look at if you Google and look at the reports of SARS, and I have had access to some 6-8, which is all available in the public realm, you'll be very, very surprised that the post-event analysis is exactly what we should have followed, right? They had called out every single thing that is happening in 2006. At least there are a couple of reports which are phenomenally well written, and you will say, oh my God, we ignored all of this. The reason was simple. The SARS impact was very contained. One is it was not as perhaps as lethal as this one. The second one was it was not as contagious. And third was the world was not as integrated as it is. So the movement of people and services today, especially from China, wasn't as much in 2002, 2003 when SARS pandemic, or rather the epidemic broke out. Therefore, we could contain it. There are about 10 nations or something that got impacted, and then people could easily manage that. Whereas today's nature is extremely different and difficult. And hence, the central theme of this presentation is question everything that you will be doing. So, it's good to look at the macro, saying, these are the challenges. Now, there are so many white noises, what we call as, like, what will Trump do? What will happen to China? How will other nations behave? People say it is favorable to India. All these are beautiful discussions, and we should be reading them for our understanding. And, there are different dimensions we get from those discussions. But frankly, tomorrow morning, if I have to live my life and manage my operations and what I have in front of me, I don't think any of them would matter. What would matter is what is in my control and how best I can, utilize those things, and how well I can conduct myself and my people and get my operations back to normalcy. So that's why this part of life is only 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react to it. So only thing we have in our hand is our response. And exactly as I said, since these are uncharted territories that we are entering into, we should be very mindful of who we want to be accompanied by. What I mean is, if it's a territory which is known, I know, on the road I will get a McD, I'll get a Sharavana Bhavan, I'll get a dhaba, I'll have enough restrooms, water is not a problem. But if I'm entering into a forest or a territory which I am completely unaware of, and I know that there is not too much that anyone knows, which means nobody has been there, then the kind of people, kind of things, kind of mindset that we want to carry along with us will have to be very different, isn't it? So that is what I have just highlighted. And what happened was, as I was, crafting some of this, it became very nice so-called framework, 3V model, and nothing to carry home about, write home about. But all I'm saying is that it helps us in remembering well and structuring our thought process. And I truly believe the top three behaviors that are extremely important in these kind of circumstances will be, one is super flexibility, and I think some of you would have seen this presentation that I placed on the LinkedIn, would obviously know what it means. I'll go slightly deeper into it, what I mean by super flexibility, and how do we really extract this in our organizations. So the three virtues, to start with the first 3V. Super flexibility. What do you mean by super flexibility? The flexibility in terms of time, resources, and funds. I'll talk about first people on the ground. I assume I'm a foot soldier. If I'm a foot soldier, and I reflected back during good times how I conducted, I would finish my work, and I would walk away from office to home. Even if I've had a few more extra hours that I could put in, I wouldn't make it available necessarily for everyone, unless, there is always a bell curve in terms of people's behavior also. So I'm not trying to draw a broad brush out here. There will be people who will be far more benevolent and, putting the organization ahead of everything. But that was not necessary, right? The whole concept of work-life balance, I'll be coming to that. That's part of this, right? Whereas now, today, when you open up your plant production line, operations, dealerships, etc., or sales organizations, you will not be coming back to full capacity, as I mentioned to you earlier. And therefore, every penny counts. And hence, people offering what they have in their hand is going to be extremely important. Okay, so it goes down to the last level. Now, as a manager, when we are given certain budgetary allocations, we kind of hoard them. Right? Best people, I want them to be retained in my function, even if they don't have sufficient work at times. And we have all done that. And for right reasons, because the world in the past was far more competitive in nature within the organization, within individuals. So my unit versus your unit, right? My peers versus me, kind of thing. So it was a healthy competition. But today, we don't have the luxuries of competition. Trust me on that. The second thing that's going to happen, and which is very important, is the, the currently, if you see, government has put a pretty much slow moratorium saying you cannot retrench your employees, and anybody who retrenches will come in the radar of the labor organization, and then at least you become a headline item, and therefore nobody is going to act on. But you are all from business world. You understand the realities of life. In a quarter's time, we can clearly see the revenues are absolutely zilch for many industries, and costs are there. Costs have to be realigned to the revenues. And therefore, what is going to happen is the kind of budgets and resources that we will have at our disposal will be far, far, far lesser than what we can even imagine. And if there are lockdowns, partial lockdowns and releases, partial lockdowns and releases as the pandemic takes various shapes and forms, right? We have to play it out a little bit. Are we prepared? The scenario will be vastly different. Therefore, the mindset of reality, mindset of giving, mindset of accumulating everything that's available is extremely important. And hence, even as managers, right, we have to motivate our people to give more by us becoming a role model. Now, one tangible thing, and the second one is orientation. Do and tell or mere tell. Always leaders have given, or experts would go and tell you, go and do it. I'll give you instructions. Whereas today we don't have time for all that. People have to remember that I have to go and soil my hand and make it happen. So people roll up their sleeves and do multiple things. Those will be the virtuous resources in our hand. And the first thing, as I told you, is to reflect whether I am offering this or not. And the second is, am I motivating my people to offer this or not? So that is at both ends of the spectrum. One tangible action item I can think of today, if I were to be in a corporate role, would be that I'll open up a portal or even a spreadsheet where my team members can start logging in. I have these 4 hours that I can offer on these days, or I have this extra skill that I can offer, right? Which is what is about versatility. So more utility I can offer to the organization, the better. And what does it mean? Juggling priorities. Somebody who can take up different priorities. Wearing multiple hats. What does it mean? Like, for example, I'm doing one type of work, but in the adjacencies, if I can build a little bit more competence, I can take up 30% more effort from another overlapping layer. So people will have to really voluntarily come out and say, what are our secondary skills? And we'll have to show the willingness to take up some of those things which are slightly unknown to us, but we can make it happen, right? So these are a couple of things which are, versatility and super flexibility are kind of intertwined, but then I wanted to distinguish saying one is about, resources, funds, and people. The second one is really about the skills and ability to do multiple things and gaining more knowledge or the skills to do more things. I hope you have understood what I'm talking about. So one tangible action I would take away from this is to go and really, sit with my team and open up a spreadsheet saying, here are the secondary skills that I can offer, because many times we wouldn't have captured that in the organization. Here are the resources that I can bring to the table. The third very important virtue in these kind of times is swift decision makers, because there is no time for elaborate democratic processes where we can have meetings after meetings. And hence, I would like to compare it against a Formula One driver, right? Race driver. You can plan as much as you want. You can plan your pit stops. You can plan whole lot of things. But once you get onto the track, it is the driver who's going to make calls as things unravel. Because what has competition thought is not something that we have in our hand. How the weather conditions will be, we don't know. Really operate on the road is something, or on the track wouldn't be something that will be entirely in our control, no matter how much it is. And therefore, people who can make those decisions, you will have to reflect now, saying, was I taking too long to make certain decisions? Did I need clarity into everything? Was I able to operate in ambiguity or not? So these are self-reflections one has to do. So the whole idea of three virtues is from the perspective of reflecting ourselves, saying, am I going to be useful to the organization? And second, if I am, can I make all others also understand and make them far more virtuous for the organization's recovery back, right? Back to normalcy. So these are the three things which I consider as virtues. Of course, there is resilience, the optimism, all of that is also extremely important. But those are, kind of essential for any environment, right? But I personally feel if I'm going dark, my compatriots will have to be those who are super flexible, who don't have rigidity, saying, I can only do this much. People who are multi-skilled, who can offer me more than one skill. And third is people who can make decisions, which means people who can call shots. With that, while I want people to accompany me, I also want the toxic behavior to be removed. Uh, you know, how much ever we wish, each one of us carries some of the toxic behaviors, right? I mean, in Hindi, there is a colloquial saying "दूध का धुला हुआ कोई भी नहीं है." So I have my own challenges. Every one of us have certain shortcomings, but there are certain shortcomings which will be complete derailers in these circumstances. During good times, we can carry those along without having an impact on the businesses. But today, these will really derail and will be productivity killers and organization killers. Troublemakers. Troublemakers are these who create friction within the team. So they are acerbic in nature. Of course, there aren't far too many in any organization of this nature, but if there are a few, we will have to call them out and say, look, this is not the time to do any of those. And organizations can't tolerate and carry that baggage, because the moment of crisis, the kind of nature and magnitude we are in, we cannot have distractions in the organization. Second is the rumor mongering. I mean, all of us have done. I've been a victim as well as a criminal in some sense. What I mean is sitting in the cafeteria and talking about the organization dynamics and a whole lot of other things. I don't have time for that this time, because the rumor mongering only creates more and more negative energy. And the last one is the me over we. I think I've already mentioned a little bit about this. It's not about, because there is one element which is interlinked to me over we behavior, which is the way we have defined the performance metrics within the organization. The moment we have an individual level competitiveness built into our metrics of measure, this behavior will be the mainstay, that me over me. So we will have to redefine those performance metrics, and I'll come to that as we move along. And I'm seriously questioning that part, because end of the day, as much as we have innate abilities of certain nature, which can be changed or not, the environment in which we are also brings out the kind of behavior in us, right? If we are in a slightly highly competitive, aggressive environment, by nature, you will yourself getting a little bit more aggressive. So I'm just drawing the attention on that. It is not that these are not known. All I am saying is that you cannot carry this burden anymore, or an organization cannot carry this burden that I'm placing, if at all I am one, I have traits of any of these. So I'm just calling it out, saying these are villainies. That's the second 3V. The cynicism is one of the put among one of these buckets. Sardonic behavior, right? You want more propitious behavior, the more favorable, more optimistic, more constructive. Criticism is okay. People asking questions is perfectly okay. But complaining, right? After we have going and bitching about one way, the tangible action is how do we make this happen? Because it's not easy. It is culture in some sense, and it is behavioral. About changing the behavior is going to take time. One way we can think of doing this is get some early starters or early adopters, what you call it. They can become the brand ambassador. Where they can bring this change. What I mean is, assume I have a team member who's completely bought into this. But that person has to come from that community. Community in the sense, is it a developer community, is it a plant operator community, supervisor community? They become the role models for the rest of the people. And that's the only way you can scale and remove some of this negative energy from the organization. Otherwise, it will take a long time. And of course, we'll have to make it visible to people that it will not be tolerated anymore. The third thing that I'll move on to the third V, which is the vitamins, what I call as. And vitamins are nothing but the ones where we need to create a conducive environment. Finally, as managers and entities in an organization, we can create a very beautiful environment for everyone to function, right? And thrive, survive and thrive. And so, what are those three vitamins that we need? One is empowerment, which is a word every one of us have known. But please mind you, the execution level, when you go, and I know I have interacted with so many people in the last 8 years also, one constant bickering I've heard from people across the layer is that they feel they are disempowered. They say, I could have done a lot more, but the organization doesn't trust me. And there was a reason for it, because in the industrial world, if you look at it, the intelligence was required only the machines and a small part of the organization. We wanted people to come and follow the processes and not question them. But today's world is actually driven by knowledge. And the crisis makes it even more harder. And these are the times where we have to seriously question and say, why are we holding back on empowering our people? Of course, accountability comes with responsibilities. We have to help our people, and how do we do it? Right? One example that comes to my mind, my favorite example, is of this incident that took place at Starbucks Cafe about good 15 years back. It's an old story, and some of you might have even heard about it. But let me narrate it for the sake of giving you a nuance of what is that empowerment required. So the story goes this way. A young gentleman walked into a Starbucks cafe one winter morning and ordered a hot cup of coffee. And as you know, in the Western world, they are connoisseurs of coffee. And therefore, he ordered a Colombian coffee with a vanilla shot and blah, blah, blah. The barista smilingly fixed the coffee and handed it over to the gentleman. Gentleman paid about $3.50. That was the price of the coffee, and walked out of the cafe. In flat less than 60 seconds, which is less than a minute, the same customer or the gentleman rushed back into the cafe and happened to order the same coffee with the same barista. Now, what would have happened in a normal cafe, right? We all know, we have seen cafes as well, and I'm sure in other parts of the world. The barista would have nicely fixed the coffee and handed it over. In this case, this barista realized that it was the same customer. It was the identical coffee he was ordering, and she intuitively asked him, "Sir, didn't you order the same coffee?" And he said, "Yes." Then she said, "If you don't mind, may I ask you, what are the reasons behind ordering the same coffee again?" And the gentleman said, as soon as I stepped out of the cafe, it slipped out of my hand and coffee spilled over." The lady smilingly fixed the coffee, handed him that cup of coffee, and said, "Sir, this coffee is on us." Right? The last statement she said was, "Sir, this coffee is on us." take a moment and think of what has happened here and what does empowerment mean, right? A frontline barista who's a mere worker in a cafe made a call saying, this particular coffee I can offer to the customer free. Uh, can you imagine if this call would have been made by barista just on her own? One is the attitude, hiring quality, all that you can reflect. But you need to understand that Starbucks has a process of telling the last layer, even the foot soldier, what is in their hand to make the difference in the lives of the customers. Now, imagine what has happened in this case. The first question we would ask is, what is the cost of this coffee? Many of them respond when I have workshops, $3.50. $3.50, mind you, is the price of the coffee. Cost of the coffee would have been perhaps $1, right? Loaded cost. But still, that $1 is a cost. Now the question is, if a lot of them go on to do the same thing and exploit the system, what's going to happen? But Starbucks says, my customers wouldn't exploit me when my intent is right. And therefore, I'm going to empower my last layer, right? Which is what is the autonomy at all levels. Extremely important in a crisis situation of this nature. The reason are twofold. One, you don't have the time for the layers, the news to come up from layers to the level where the decision is. At the ground level, the customers, the partners, people, it is applicable to all, your own employees. The decision has to be made then and there because there is not enough time, because the kind of crisis that is going to unfold as we start our operations will be of very different magnitude. Right? Can I be prepared? I'm not saying I'm not trying to put fear or anxiety in your mind, but it's all about mindset and preparation. So can we empower people at all levels? The call that the Starbucks barista could make saying, this customer has a problem, I'm going to write off this $1. So people will have to clearly know what are the calls they can make at all levels. And as supervisors and managers, we need to be really thinking about it. Now, one simple technique there is that in every role, there are certain things which are extremely important creating the experience, right? And those things can be really let go to those people, giving them complete understanding of what they're getting into and providing some safety net as well. Right? We also need to provide, when we are giving autonomy to all people, we also have to create some bit of safety net. What should we do? So there are several examples of this nature. I'll be narrating one more a little later. So among the three vitamins, the most important one I would say is empowerment at all levels. Organizations support, L&D training organizations can work with leaders to draw this entire thing down and help implement that at all levels. The second thing is about empathy. Everybody, this is the overused word, and I'm not going to get too much deeper into it. But my view is this: empathy is nothing but sensitivity towards others. Now, empathy need not be just about your customer. It can be for the boss, because all of us are going through stressful situations. The nature of stress will be different at different levels. There will be, retrenchments. For example, I'm taking the hardest topic. If there are colleagues, peers of ours who are being let go, what is their financial condition at this moment? Can we, as a team, together make that a little bit less? Which is the second part which I've mentioned here: ability to make a difference. If we can't make even move a needle to make a difference towards making a difference, empathy and knowing only that I can emote is not sufficient during this. And mind you, there have been amazing examples from different levels of the cadre. There have been examples of housekeeping folks coming together and saying, I will give away my 500 rupees, but let's not fire two more of our friends, right? So these are human beings have the capability to do extraordinary things, okay, during tough times. So empathy has to be a bedrock, but we need to communicate. We need to make it visible to people on how they can rally around, right? So that's the part that I'm talking about. The third one is ease of doing business. So ease of doing business is all about crashing processes, systems, policies, the bureaucracy that we have, the approval norms that we have, all of them have to be questioned. One example, right, of nature, to what extent organizations go. This is the case of Jan Carlson. Some of you might have really read this book as well, and you will be able to see. It was the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines who took over the helms in 1981 and brought the airlines out of bankruptcy in 10 years. And it was one of the most profitable airlines in the early 90s till he was running the helm of Scandinavian Airlines. And by the way, Jan Carlson also is he's the one who coined the term. It's a monumental book. In fact, if you get your hands on this book, if you haven't read, it's worth reading. And the principles of in this of managing customers are, it's relevant for all times. Now, uh, one particular episode that he narrates in Moments of Truth is very interesting. What happened was Jan Carlson took over in 1981, and then he started scanning across the globe which companies are scoring highest in customer management. And mind you, we didn't have Google or internet in 1980, right? And from his knowledge of scoring a lot of databases and articles and so on and so forth, he came to know about this hotel called Oriental Hotel based in Bangkok, Thailand, which had won the uh, award for best hotel in the world for the 10th consecutive year. Now that really drew his attention, saying, "Look, I want to really understand what they are doing in this hotel." Now again, if you it was not the era of emails nor the social media, so he dialed the board number of that hotel, and he introduced himself as the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines, and he wanted to really understand what was happening, and he wanted to speak with the manager. And the manager was busy. They somehow caught hold of him because they knew someone important was calling, and the manager came on the line. This sudden question from Carlson, tell me what is different between your hotel and other hotels that has made the difference of this winning the award for being ranked best in the world for the 10th consecutive year. Obviously, the manager was, taken aback because he was in a very different mindset, managing the day's challenges. And here was a one strategic question. And mumblingly, he said, I can't often tell you a whole lot of that I can clearly, see as a differentiator because I've worked elsewhere also, is that our employees need permission to tell no to a customer. Because in all other organizations there are a very few things a front end soldier can do, and for everything to get a yes he has to go back to the organization. Here was one organization where they had completely changed the rules of the game and made doing business for their employees far more easier. He said our employees need permission to tell a no to the customer. Okay? So this is the beautiful example of just narrating what kind of questioning you will have to do in terms of ease of doing. So I've covered three parts right now, and I think we'll the time also 5:40. I'll take about 10 more minutes, maybe 15 minutes, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So I've covered who should be your friends in these times of crisis. Three virtues, three villainies who you eliminate, and what is the kind of ecosystem and an environment we need to build for resurrecting life back into our businesses. Going forward, here is what I have created as a resurrection canvas, and the reason is this: the resurrection canvas looks at what are changes we need to bring at a tangible level, and the context is very simple. Look at this beautiful ICU room, right? I mean, one of the finest um, setups. You can find the space between the beds, how neatly organized. During good times, there would be a massive infection control, norms, rules. This is the ordinary circumstance. Turn the clock today, what's happening? This is the nature of ICUs we have. Right? One of the countries, they opened up a parking lot During good times, do you think we would have ever allowed, forget about ICU, even a hospital, right? Outpatient hospital. I don't think people would have allowed this because our hygiene standards, our references would have been very different. All I'm saying is these are extraordinary circumstances. Okay, these are circumstances none of us have experienced. Imagine the supply chain, global supply disconnected for good 60 days, and some of the components you can't even bring back. Okay? Imagine migrant workers that we need to fire back our offices. So these are completely different environment where I'm just setting a context of why I'm recommending some of this. This is another picture I found. Look at the circumstances. Can you imagine this being a open air, the terrace of some large building being converted into ICU, right? And therefore, my question is, can we conduct in the same fashion and expect, or some changes, and expect our operations to resume back to normalcy? We need to seriously. So what I've called here, one of the things very important is this thing called in-moment management. And the words have power, right? In-moment management, real-time management. These are words you will have to remember, which means the calls will have to be made then and there. The way you will operate will be very different. So what are those? Let's look at 4 or 5 building blocks of businesses. You have people, policies, processes, financials, and the customer, which are 4 key components, blocks, building blocks of an organization. There is a communication which cuts across everything, which is the what I call as an oxygen or the blood veins of an organization. And then putting it all together is the direction. So I've covered these 6 elements in terms of what we should be doing. So this is a bit more prescriptive in nature, and I'm being a bit more provocative. People part. What do we need? Fungibility. Everybody understands. What do you mean by fungibility? People will have to volunteer and change their skills. They'll have to acquire new skills. And this is where the training organization, learning and development organizations, HR organizations can play a tremendous. But they can't be wearing a traditional hat saying, "Nahi, nahi, isne nahi kiya hai. People have not done this. These are the roles. These are the job descriptions. Here is what the skills we need." No. Open up that. Open the bracket. Move that around. Right? The second part is accountability. Accountability will be, everybody understands accountability. All I'm saying is that earlier organizations had built a lot of interdependence. What do I mean by interdependency? Once I do my production line, there is a quality assurance team which takes it. So inherently, I know if there were to be some challenges, the quality assurance team is going to handle. When I open my 60% of the capacity to function and I want that to produce 100% of the productivity, now mind you, I'll have to really wear the hat of first time right attitude. There are not too many safety nets, right? And therefore, I'm calling out accountability. But even more important is all of us will have to now gear up to this world for next 12 to 18 months where work is life. There is nothing called work and life balance, right? I'm not saying life has to be forgotten. What I mean is, there are dependencies at home. Each one of us have our own situation, which is different. There are some very, very needy, situations at home where you can't really let go some of the balancing part, and that's perfectly understandable. But there are places, some of us who have been very privileged, and during good times we would focus on saying, "I want a balance in work." But mind you, today if I lose this job, I'm getting a little bit more, stark here. This job, there is no second job, right? Because the kind of environment, the economics, realities of the world, we are talking about, I am just talking about trillions of dollars of loss in worldwide economy. So clearly, there won't be as many jobs. We'll have to dearly hold on to our jobs, make sure our peers understand that, make sure our team members understand that, make our organizations as robust and successful as possible so that the impact is minimized. And therefore, I'm calling this out as a number one priority that all of us will have to gear up to this saying work is life for the next 12 to 18 months. Okay? Hyper commitment world is what I have. Let's move forward. So people part is over. Policies and processes. I think we have spoken enough about it. I'm just going to be, focusing on one or two things here. Empowerment at all levels. I've talked about it. So can we look through the policies, change them, approval policies, um, the norms, who can commit certain things, who cannot commit certain things. I take an example of a developer in a software industry. The developer in the software industry, a customer comes and tells, make this change. Uh, he or she is not empowered to tell the customer exactly what is the commercial impact. But the effort is decided by the same person. And sometimes even the effort cannot be communicated to the customer directly. So it goes through certain ranks, and then the project manager or somebody makes a call. Please change, redefine your process. Let the person on the ground make that call. Customer may come back and say, I don't have money, but the developer can go ahead and say, there is effort. Even I need to survive, right? So these dialogues, we need to enable them. We can't just let them free to go and do anything. Therefore, the communication will become important. I'll be covering some of that to make sure what is the safety net we need to provide, right, for empowering our people. This is what I call as what calls they can make has to be very clear. So we need to define that for our people. The last is the performance metrics. I also mentioned this in another area. If your behavior is tied to the kind of metrics you are measured on, largely. And I personally feel the performance metrics we had defined for pre-COVID era was highly competitive in nature. We can't have those metrics. It hardly had the human angle of measure. Nobody cared about how much of the contribution he gave, which was not tangible enough, right? Which didn't result in his own numbers, but he would have blown the numbers of everybody else. Okay? So these will become extremely important. Now is the time to just take a hacksaw, look at your performance metrics, change them, because on a rapid basis, we need to put up those ICUs, those parking lots, and open air theater. That is what is required now, and it has to be done. Funds. One point I want to share here is the financial situation of an organization is never shared with all layers. Right? I'm not saying how much money is there with the organization needs to be shared, but even as a project manager, when I have a budgetary allocation, I want my people, and by design it was built like that. Why? We want it to be a little bit more manipulative. If I have $100 and if I tell you I have $100, you'll possibly spend all the $100. But if I told you $90, then you will push yourself. So that was the reason behind it. But mind you, in next 3 months, that cushion of $10 wouldn't be there. In fact, what I will be given is $50. And when I have $50, I'll have to call all of you saying, what are you willing to give? Right? And knowing this situation helps everybody in the team to rally around those small little sacrifices. You may feel this looks too tactical, like, no water bottles, cut down on free tea, coffee. If I was a tea guzzler, 5 teas cost X amount, 10 rupees, take out one chai, 20% savings. Now, every drop counts in an environment of this. Minor action, mega scale, huge rewards. This, if I were to bring in an angle of empathy, we create among ourselves small, how do we help certain people who will be taking cuts where they have dire needs, right? So some of the loss cannot be, really within the realms of the business controls. Get out of it and make it happen. So that's what I mean by managing, showing the funds to everybody. I think the time has come where people understand exactly how the financials of an organization, unit, group, team is, right? And this is going to be a reality very soon. The last one is about the customer, and I think everybody has understands it. Get as close as possible. Customer interest or focus interest, and the last one is, please understand on the customer side, if you are having a business which is global in nature, there might be a few where the COVID casualty is a reality. It is like it is not distant possibility, and therefore we need to be very very mindful of what we are going through. Some of us can really offer them taking over some of their accountability and saying, I will offer you this, don't worry about it, right? here are the 20 things you are doing. You won't be able to focus on this. These 5 things at least I can help you. Okay? So these are the times where we can offer extended capabilities of ours for somebody to have bring their pains down. And also I have spoken about the empowerment, that how it reflects into customer action, how redefining the goals itself or the policies results in certain kind of behavior, like in the Oriental Hotel in Bangkok. So these are all great examples related to customer. The last very important factor among these 5 blocks at the bottom is communication. More is not necessarily merrier. People say in times of crisis, communicate. I think it is ironical on this webinar. I'm saying soon there are enough memes floating around saying death by webinar, and I'm sure everybody wants to communicate. But if we spend 60% of our time just absorbing communication from all angles, where is the time to work? And mind you, when I have 60%, 70% capacity, which has to fire up 100% productivity, I think we need to get a little bit more precise and concise with our communication. And this is where I'm recommending having the frequency and importance of every communication has to be extremely important. So let's have some protocols, right? Let there not be overlap. My big boss has to communicate, let it be once a week. But if he comes on call, this is what it means. It will be very, very clear, sharp. What is that one activity that I can add? That's about it. Shorter the sweeter. Brevity is key. Then you have your manager, the team lead. The team lead will have to communicate more because there is tangible action that is going to happen. So this morning I will have one call with my team, and by evening there is going to be another call. The first morning call will clearly lay out what is the autonomy that you are giving, what is that is expected, and by evening hopefully those expectations have been met. If there are any course corrections, you will make. But there is no point having this crisscross of communications. As much as possible avoid them, right? Which means we have to take far more accountability, and interdependence has to be minimized. You have to learn on the fly. So these are very subtle nuances which is extremely important at the ground. The third is the empathy communication. I think operate from heart and then the mind, because often the past it's been thinking over feeling. Now I think feeling has to take over the thinking. The last one summarizes what is required in communication. Communicate to give exact situation, because we don't want fear, unnecessary fear. We don't want unauthentic information. If somebody wants to validate certain information, there has to be a help desk which they will call and say, is this authentic? Because there will be enough rumors. Second, clear expectations. This is at a managerial level. As I told you, in the morning, if you are having a call and you give me clear instructions, expectations, it becomes very easy for me to function and operate and create results. Third is communicate to inspire, because we are all human beings, we are emotional. There is an element of inspiration that is required. So symbols have their place. Posters, having those small, inspiring quotes every morning. These are handles we would require during times of crisis. The last is coming to the leadership part. Setting direction in an uncertain time is your role. Actually, this is the primary role. If you don't set the direction, nobody has any direction, and therefore can you really work in ambiguity and set some kind of direction? This is where calling shots becomes a very important thing, right? Are you a decision maker? Write your plans in pencil, because the plans will change. No matter how much you will do long-term planning, things will keep evolving. Okay, as things evolve, one of our own person falls sick and is quarantined for 2 weeks. No plan will be able to bring that person back for next, right? So this just necessitates, the reason why I've written write plans in pencil tells you vividly that things will be fluid, and therefore plan for today, plan for a week. Shorter plans, more connected plans, but not sticking to a long-term plan. A long-term view objectives can be there, but it will have to be very, very compartmentalized, at least for next 6 to 12 months. I've already mentioned this. Jettison formality. A lot of us put a facade. I'm a manager. I'm not accessible. Our human part has to be felt during these these times. Okay, allow people to come into your so-called that fort which is built. Okay, so I've just put it in, and some of it is a reflection of how I manage the management style, right? I'm just mentioning you because all of us come from our own references. Okay, abandon the comforts. A lot of us left our teams to do the front end work, and we just retired for home. But that was okay during good times. You are the biggest inspiration for your team. I don't think anybody else can bring that kind of energy and commitment among people. Please be there with them on the ground, which means we'll all have to have conversations with our family members, friends, wider society for the support that we would require. Because one job lost in the community means so much additional burden on the society. Okay, so much of tension, so much of unwanted incidents. Therefore, it is extremely important to have candid conversations, and wherever help can come in, be humble and seek that. So that's what is the resurrection canvas in short. Right? I've taken about 5, 6 dimensions of management, key components, building blocks, and I've tried to really question and bring out at least one element each one of these, which is slightly different from what we've done. I think these are essential elements in our charting the way back to normalcy. So, in summary, I'll now, I'm pretty much done. I'll close with one narration. The summary is 3 virtues, who should be your friends, 3 is what we should really jettison, 3 vitamins, how do we create a beautiful environment during these times, and 3 points from the resurrection canvas, redefine your operating policies and processes. Extraordinary situations require extraordinary action. And the third thing that is very important is operate from heart and inspire everyone. I wanted to that would be the central theme of your operating mechanism. Now, before I conclude, some of them ask always, how much difference can we make, right? Um, because I have no power in the organization. I want to narrate this again. One example that Jan Carlzon of Scandinavian Airlines that I referred earlier in the book Moments of Truth narrates. What happened was, as he put together all these processes, systems, broke the bureaucracy, changed the mechanism, he put $100 in the hands of every employee who comes in touch with the customer. That they had that liberty to spend $100 on the customer experience. So after all this, he says, about 2, 3 years down the line, he was still skeptical, will this work? Because organization is huge and the aviation sector is very, very challenging. He narrates one incident that gave him the confidence. He says he was to fly to another place in his airlines, and he took a normal flight. He didn't want to go by his private jet, something like that. So he took a normal flight where there were other passengers, and they were waiting for the boarding to complete and then leave. When he was having a cursory conversation with the pilot in the cockpit, the plane had a jerk. Suddenly, the plane shook. And Jan Carlzon says, he was shocked what happened. And the pilot was also surprised. So Jan Carlzon asked the pilot what happened. And the pilot looked down from the window and made some signals at the bottom and looked back and smiled at Jan Carlzon. And he said, you are the reason for this. And Jan Carlzon said, what happened? He said, the tow truck driver at the bottom is showing his clock and asking me to move. Okay, so you can imagine the impact of some of the empowerment and this whole believing in our own people. What kind of impact? Jan Carlzon says, at that moment I knew if a tow truck driver would shake an aircraft, I knew the whole organization was being shaken for the right reason. So my point is, each one of us can shake the airplane if we are a tow truck driver. And if we are in the capacity of a manager, can we wake up all our tow truck drivers, right? So the question is, remember, while doubt creates a mountain, faith tunnels through it. And each one of us have to have that faith in ourselves and restore faith in others around us so that we can quickly get back to normalcy. And my best wishes to every one of you in that journey. If there is any which way, you need bouncing boards, or you want to cross check something and you think I can be part of that journey, never hesitate. I mean, my email ID, phone number is all available. I'm available on LinkedIn. It will be a delight to be part of your journey to bring things back to normalcy. Because as I told you, finally the society's harmony and peace is linked to organization's success, and each one of you contribute to that. So my best wishes, and obviously we shouldn't forget that there are the times where there will be a lot of pain, and my best wishes of health to you and your dear near ones. And there ends my webinar, and I hand over the baton back to Astha. Astha, back to you.
Sure, sir. So we have, first of all, thank you, sir, for such informative session. We have a couple of questions from the audience which I would like to ask you. So the first question is from Tejas. He says, what should be the next immediate steps for startups in IT sector that are at go-to market stage, considering the current market situation and lack of resources?
Tejas, I also work with an accelerator, and I do consult to several of the startups. There are two parts to your question. One is the funding part. I just cannot answer. I mean, I have no answer to it. Honestly, I don't. And I'm just hoping government comes with some kind of scheme like the Mudra loans types, where even interest-free loan is given to some of the well-meaning startups. Otherwise, the financial situation that I see is fairly. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm just giving you the reality. I mean, and I've logged into many of those investor webinars. All of them are boilerplate. They are not really helpful, many of those. What I mean by that is I'm not criticizing them. All I'm saying is that cash is king. I understand cash is king. I don't have cash. What should I do, right? And not too many answers. I'm hoping the government comes with certain uh, uh, schemes for entrepreneurs, especially the startups in early stages. Biotech, for example, is BIRAC, rather a unit called BIRAC, which has done a phenomenal stuff, and you get money in your bank account. I've seen hundreds of biotech companies surviving only because of that. The second part that I can address, which is in our is to really look at what makes sense, whether your solution post COVID or not. One of the things I keep giving as a just as a mantra is social distancing as a design consideration. So is your product somewhere there? I mean, if your product is something that is going to touch human intensive processes, if it is something that is touching human intensive processes, it'll do very well. It is really right. It's only a matter of time. Obviously, will somebody wake up day after tomorrow and have conversations? May not, because they are all trying to figure out their world. Forget about bringing value proposition they have. If it is relevant,
I think we are having network issues. Rajesh sir, we're not able to hear you.
can't.
Hello. Yeah, Rajesh sir, we can see you now. I think there was some network issue. We can hear you. We cannot see you, but that is fine. As long as we can hear you.
But you can hear right now.
Yes, 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 we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. What I was saying is the question Tejas asked. I mean, I don't know at what point I just faded away. Um, did you get the first part, which is the funding part?
Yes, we did. We did.
Okay.
We
The
just lost
second
you in the
part,
last couple of sentences.
last couple of sentences. Okay. So what I'm saying is really go back and take a look at the value proposition, whether it is truly, because in good times, good to have also was okay. but it will only be must-have now. And many solutions have those must. We don't articulate them. So my specific question about your own venture, can have a one-on-one discussion.
Thank you, sir. We have a couple of more spec. We have a couple of more industry-specific questions here. One of the participants, Ranjan Nandi, he asks that some firms that would operate at half of their capacity, which might not even cover the fixed cost for the visible future. So, what is your prescription for those firms? How do they survive?
The way to survive is very simple. You can't get emotional during these times, okay? And nobody can manufacture money out of thin air. Obviously, depending upon your debt situation, all that companies will try to get capital, right? But as a manager, it is my duty to get my revenue and cost aligned. Simple. If my revenue has crashed by 50%, I had a margins of 20%. I can shrink the margin to even zero or whatever the organizational norms are required for that to survive. But I don't have such a huge cushion. So the question is, now do I want to go back to my team saying, I'm going to throw away 10 people? Or do I want to pose this question to all of them in a matured manner? People will have to make those extraordinary calls because we have never experienced something of this. That's exactly my point. I think you caught the pulse of exactly what I was trying to say. Okay, so the typical nuance of I will continue to draw that kind of salary is gone. I will have to, if I am in a corporate world today, I would make that sacrifice because it is not a sacrifice; it is survival of myself. Just imagine. My point is, if the revenue shrink to 30%, can we set examples? Can we set scenarios for a real harsh conditions at this moment? I think once you start getting into the nitty gritty, you'll find a lot of things we can get away with and save lot many lives. It's not about saving people. It is essential because uh, there is going to be otherwise the social unrest, and we are all responsible for that, right? Because businesses run the societies today. I may sound very dramatic in that fashion, but I can clearly see it from where I'm sitting. It's visible to all of us. All I'm saying is that make those calls which we have never thought about. The answer lies in there.
Sure, sir. Um, so we have one other question which says that there are definitely people who have who struggle in learning, unlearning, and then relearning. And how should you inspire those people who are not willing to be flexible and wear multiple hats?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. The transparency in communication will be extremely important. Okay, that's the first step. Clearly laying out the scenario, and it's not an individual. I'll call a team meeting and show them exactly what is the situation we are in, right? And it's not about shocking the people. There is always optimism that is required, and that's where some of these, uh, however, let me appear. I have a dear friend called Amin Haq who taught me how to teach business storytelling. I think some of that will be very important. Drawing parallels. What we are, people don't want uh, prescriptive statements. They have to be made to reflect. But at some point in time, you can't carry that baggage. Okay, unless people are productive. Um, the way the pay has been defined, we used to have grades. We would have, this grade can only vary between this and this. I'll seriously question. That's why I'm saying, next 6 to 12 months, if you want to seriously survive and thrive, you'll have to question all that. What I mean, if I am a guy who's offering only one skill and my utility is only 60% of the day, you will keep me, but I can't be given 100% of my salary, right? I'm just getting to that real harsh realities. Maybe I'm something unreasonable, but my gut says we'll get to those stages. If we can prepare early, journey will be far more smoother, and the pain will be far lesser, and the the positivity that we can carry will be far more. And that's what I'm trying to explain out here. So obviously, uh, rigid, unflexible people, of course, their utility, we'll have to see how we can cross level them, still accommodate and all that. But beyond the point, you can't carry that burden anymore. That's my honest opinion, because I personally feel we are very, very over optimistic about what's going to happen. I would rather err on the side of a caution at this juncture because of the way things are unraveling. And because I'm not in a hot seat, I can be a bit more emotional about it. But if I'm sitting there in your seat, I will go through the same dilemmas.
Sure, sir. So another question is, how do you think the global value chain will evolve after COVID-19, especially in the manufacturing industry?
Everybody is saying immediately after this COVID-19 scenario, whatever is going to come, China will not be part of it. Um, this is again, everybody can give you a crystal. I can show you a tarot card reader, and I'm one of the tarot card readers. Somebody has really experienced this in their lives in the last 25 years. Minor disconnects we have handled supply chain in terms of, say, assume Thailand floods. Of course, we have handled that. But that was definitive in nature, and we knew it was not the whole world. Now, mind you, just imagine you want to start your factory. Where is the component manufacturer at this moment? Day after tomorrow, when you want to open? Still in China. Okay. To build a plant in India, everybody is saying India will be favored, or so on and so forth. I don't know whether there's global audience on this webinar, and therefore I should be mindful, because it's not a India-China situation that I'm trying to speak in a very patriotic manner or something. It's absolutely unemotional. Assuming that even independently that manufacturing will come to India, do you think you can put up a plant in 3 months? Some of these, it's a kid's play. The way we have behaved at times, our policies, our approval mechanism, they think it is going to change overnight. I wish this presentation I could present to the government, and government also changed at the same pace. These are all wishful thinking. I personally feel in the future, I doubt anything will change, because good 50, 60, 70% of the world's production still came from China. And if you want your plant back, that's the only place where it is available. Okay. So in the immediate future, I don't see anything changing. But over a period of time, it will change, because, obviously, pandemic is something that is going to be part of our disaster recovery. And once you say pandemic part of disaster recovery, you will see where the most vulnerability are. And then you look at data, that will not be very favorable for few countries over others, and therefore redistribution will happen. And I don't think everything will come to India. There will be several Southeast Asia, maybe Africa will emerge as one of those. So those are the things which anybody's guess here. I wouldn't worry too much about it, because at this moment, what is in my control is what I have to look at and operate with that. Because the moment I take it to macro level, which others should worry about, is a gigantic thing which will sit on our brain. It will not allow you to do even the rational things that you should.
Right, sir. Um, I have one more question, and I think it is from somebody who's working in auto and steel sector. Like many industries, like auto and steel, are stalled now. When do you think the consumption can happen? But I think you've already answered that in your previous listing that I mean, as there is no definite answer to this question at this point in time.
Yeah, but one angle, since you asked about auto, I'll add is so one thing that we clearly see is two-wheelers will increase, right? The production will increase. Everybody is saying. While Rajiv Bajaj is saying, he's right in to some extent, saying we can't go on locking down beyond a point, because we have a percent of our youth is under 30. Therefore, for 10% of our population, you can't forego the future of 76% majority, right?
Right.
But at the same time, the two-wheelers will increase, because that's the only way you can maintain social distance, right? If you want transportation and mobility. Therefore, your component manufacturing, to which particular segment within the auto industry you are serving is also very important. But you don't have migrant workers, and migrant workers are the only ones who have been firing these factories because locals haven't. Now the question is, when you open, will the locals in the current environment come and work? Right? These are the conversations we need to have make happen in the social realm, and which is where comes from, that you don't have leaders at the social level who can connect these gaps to the organizations, because it's not humanly possible by organizations. We need that bridge. These are becoming visible at this moment. Gaps, are the realities. I may sound like more complaining, but my point is, hopefully, we'll start finding answers to these.
I think I have taken all the questions that people had asked here, sir. So, unless anybody has any more questions which they quickly want to post on the chat, I think we are ready to wrap up.
Great. Yeah, I think we have overshot the time also, almost very close to time. But the questions are fairly deep. I can clearly see they are execution oriented, and I would have realized this presentation is not just a strategy level or very prescriptive in terms of do this, do that, some 3-step process. Nothing of that nature. This is an approach. I have tried to really question some of the management practices we have followed till now. I think time has come to really break it down and make some difference to ourselves, our business, our people, overall society which needs this. I think the meaning of businesses is far more relevant today than my best wishes. Astha, again, thank you so much. Meenal,
Thanks to you, sir. Your
Girish, all of
3D
you.
framework that you have shared, I am sure people will benefit from it, because as you said that yes, we need to rethink how we operate our business and how we do things differently. And from the questions, it was very clear that everybody is having jitters on how things are going to pan out after the crisis is over, or if the crisis extends for very long and maybe even in between the crisis. So yeah, as we all like to be hopeful, but we do need to prepare for the worst. So, on that note, thanks everybody for joining, and thank you, sir, so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. And thanks to ISB CBM, really, Center for Business Market.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, so have a good evening,
Stay safe
everybody, and stay
and stay
safe.
healthy. Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you so much.